Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk, the Web Game Dev Starter Kit, where I'll be talking about some tools and tips and tricks to start your web game development journey informed or continue it informed. So I'll be talking a little bit about engines, I'll be talking a little bit about player behavior, I'll share some data insights, and with that I hope to give you some good best practices to make informed choices going forward making a web game. First, a little bit about me to give you some context. It was already a little bit spoiled, but oh well. I'm Romy. I was here last year as well at INDIGO giving a talk about my cats. I'll try to stay a bit more on topic this year. I started in the Dutch games industry at Dutch Game Garden. I did event and communications internship there. Rest in peace. Then I became an event manager at Meet2Match, then a partnership manager at RobotTeddy. And while I was at RobotTeddy, I started my own company, Benry Games. And with Benry Games, I made a couple of dress-up games for the web. So this was my first experience making web games. After that, I worked as a business developer at Paladin, and now I am business developer at Poki. So please do keep in mind, I work at Poki. Poki is a web games platform. All the data that I'm using is from Poki. So yeah, it is a little bit like we from Toilet Duck advise Toilet Duck, as we could say in Dutch. And there's maybe a little bit of bias, just so you know. I do think because Poki is the largest web game browser platform that there is on web, the data that I pull can also be used in a more broad and general sense as well for web games in general. And I also truly believe that web games are the most sustainable way to build your game development business, especially for solo developers or smaller teams. And I had a little bit of space left for my boy, Bulbasaur, the best Pokemon. All right, with that in mind, let's get started. So you want to make a game for the web. The first thing you got to do is, of course, choose your engine. I have a graph here of the most used engines on Poki. So as you can see, a quarter of the games on Poki specifically actually uses Unity WebGL. I always think there's a little bit of a misconception that Unity is not good for web or that Poki specifically doesn't want Unity games. As you can see, that's not really true. Yes, there are some caveats when you work with Unity or Godot. It's going to take a little bit more time doing, for example, progressive loading to make sure that your file size stays smaller, because the initial file size of a Unity project is going to be much larger than the initial file size of, for example, a Construct 3 project. But it is very much possible to just work in Unity. Other engines that we can recommend are Construct 3. I work in Construct 3 myself. It's perfect if you're going to make a 2D game. Default is really good as well. Phaser, Play Canvas. In the end, which engine you choose, I would really base it on what you already know. If you're already a Unity dev, maybe it is going to be quicker to invest in learning some optimization than learning a new engine. And also the game that you want to make. So if you're going to make a 2D game, maybe don't look at Unity or Godot or Play Canvas, because you just don't need most of the tools and features they offer, and you can go with a smaller engine like Construct 3 or Default. Also, here's a breakdown of the average loading time in seconds for the engines that are used on Poki the most. So as you can see, the loading time for Unity and Godot is 31 seconds, compared to the fastest, which is Cocos, which is 20 seconds on average. So there is 11 more seconds in which you realistically will lose some players that are sick of waiting. They have a very, very short attention span on web. So it does matter, but the difference is not as big as you might have assumed. Also, specifically, if you're looking at Cocos to Construct or Default to Layabox, that difference is not really significant. So which one you choose is really more so your own preference and how much you want to spend on optimization, rather than there is one best choice. Also good to know, the top 20 games on Poki, they had an average loading time of 15 seconds last month, worldwide, of course, so that's a pretty good benchmark to go for if you want to be a top 20 game. In the end, whichever one you choose, the keyword is optimize. This is really super, super important on web if you want to have success. I'll show you a little example of that. So this is Stickman Hook. It released as a Unity WebGL build on Poki, and the initial file size was 40 megabytes. So they already did their progressive loading, for example. They already did some optimization, took out any unnecessary features or bloat that wasn't needed to play the game. And the median loading time for them was about 30 seconds, and their conversion to play was 50%. So that means that out of 100 players that clicked on the thumbnail because they wanted to play the game, 50% of those 50 players actually got to play the game, and 50% dropped during loading because the game didn't load for them or because they didn't want to wait for it. However, the launch was still very successful. They still found a lot of players. 50% of 2 million is still 1 million. And so they made the decision eventually to port the game to HTML5 first. And I'll show you the updated stats. So in the new HTML5 build, they dropped the file size to 6 megabytes, so it was a significant difference. And the median loading time became 4 seconds. And as you can see in the GIFs, the user experience was quite different. This is on my laptop, so that's on a good Wi-Fi connection with a new MacBook. But of course, it could have been a lot longer still on the old build for people that maybe were on 4G or 3G even. And the conversion to play with the new build became 72%. So they increased it by 22%. So 22% more players also generally means about 20% or so more revenue. And so the sum becomes quite easy at that point. So you maybe launch your game as a Unity build. You see what kind of income you have from that. Let's say it's 100 euros a day. Then you know, okay, if I'm going to change it to HTML5 first, it will become 120 euros a day. So if I can do that in a week, it will cost me this much to do it, but I will gain this much by the end of the month. So is that going to be worth it or not? It's a decision you can make later as well. You don't have to immediately start with HTML5, but you can. Then also what I would really recommend is to test your game on all kinds of devices. This is super important. Yes, on your super custom PC, it might load in 0.2 nanoseconds. That's great. But please use something, a tool like BrowserStack, for example, to also test it on a lot of other devices. You can use BrowserStack to test it on mobile devices and on other desktop or laptop devices, and also a lot of different browsers. And this will really help you to understand if your game also loads in 0.2 nanoseconds on a Motorola G5 somewhere in Pakistan. Probably not, but you might want to check at least if it loads at all. So this is also, like, I really recommend using something like this if you want to make a web game work well. Then on to some tips. I think what is really important to understand is that the web is a different platform. It's not going to work if you approach it as you would Steam or as you would approach mobile. A lot of the best practices on mobile, for example, like, I don't know, premium currency, that's something that really doesn't work on web because the players on web are looking for a very different experience than players on mobile, and you have to keep this in mind. It's a different audience, it's different tech, and it's a different platform altogether. So you will have to learn some new things. For example, you won't have a Steam page or an App Store page, so there is no space for a trailer, there is no space for text to convince people that this is the game they should play. You really have to convince them just with a thumbnail and maybe a few seconds of gameplay, so keep this in mind. Also, there's no downloads. It's very different for a player. They go to the App Store, they scroll to the list, they download Monopoly Go, I guess, and then they will play it for at least a couple of minutes because they invested some time already in it, or if they bought it on Steam, they invested some money in it, and they will not just give up if they don't immediately understand it or if they don't immediately grasp their attention. Whereas on web, they have no loyalty to your game at all. They will click on the game, and if they don't immediately understand what they should do, or they don't like it from like the first few seconds of gameplay, they just click something else, and it will instantly load for them, and they can just try that instead. So it's super, super, super important to grasp the attention of the player and make sure they understand what they're doing within a few seconds of gameplay. Also, the web is truly cross-device. So there is going to be 57% of your players are going to be on desktop, at least if it's released on Poki. 42% is going to be on mobile. So it's really important that the gameplay is fun for both of those audiences. Otherwise, you're missing a huge piece of your players. So make sure that it works, that it plays nicely with mouse and keyboard, but also with touch controls. And ideally, also make sure that the ratio scales properly. We do also see that games that have portrait mode and landscape mode usually perform better than games that only have landscape mode, but portrait mode is also something you could do in a later update if the game is already released and performing well and you want to increase your audience a little bit. All right, another really important part of this, of course, is know your players. Know who you are designing your game for and what you should focus on, because it's more about what matters for them than what matters for you. So everyone can play on web, obviously. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to download Steam. It's very, very open to anybody. You just need a link. However, we do know that in general, the larger piece of the audience is going to be younger. It's not the hardcore indie gamers that are looking for a super crunchy experience that they can dive into for a couple of weeks. It's really players that looking for a quick, casual experience that is just like a little endorphin rush, basically. We see a 50-50 gender split, so whether you choose to focus on a male audience or a female audience or both, that's all okay, it can all work. And also all genres can work. I very often get the question like, oh yeah, is there a genre that you really want to see more games in, or is there one that's definitely gonna work well? And frankly, the answer is no. It's really all about instant playability and sticky core gameplay, no matter the genre. So as long as you nail that, it can work in a shooter, it can work in a coloring game, it can work in a dress-up game, obviously. It can work in a multiplayer game. It's really more about that the core gameplay is really fun and really immediately grabs attention, more so than the genre you launch your game in. There are, of course, some things that don't work on web, and the biggest thing there is language and text-heavy stuff. Actually, we see that when there's like a text box introduced, no matter what's in the text box, the drop-off rate can be up to 50% of players. Like the moment they need to read something, they're like, nah, that's too much effort. I'm not gonna read that. So I would really, really advise you to make sure that you have the least amount of text or even no text at all, if possible. And of course, that also means that unfortunately, something like a narrative game will have a very hard time finding its audience on web. Also on how do players then engage with web games, how I see it is they step into an arcade. So you step into the arcade, in this case you go to a website where you can play games, and there's all these cabinets with flickering lights and bright colors that you can choose from, and they are there to have some fun. They're gonna play not one game, they're not gonna play one arcade cabinet, they're gonna try a couple of ones and then maybe replay one that they already played before that they liked. So keep this in mind. The average session on web is 22 minutes. So that might be during a commute, or maybe it's a break that somebody has, or they are on the toilet. I think we've all been there for 22 minutes, playing games, playing games. And that means and within that session, we know that the average amount of games played is actually 3. So that means that your game will get 6 to 10 minutes of attention. So it's not a lot. So keep that in mind when you're designing your game. You want to make sure that your full game loop fits into that 6 to 10 minutes, for example. You want to make sure that players see most of your game during that amount of time, and then if they want to play more, they can, of course, but most of your players are going to be in there for 10 minutes, so you want to make sure that that first 10 minutes of your game is really solid. Also, it really should be pick up and play, like I mentioned before, so you don't want to spend any time on a lengthy tutorial or a huge narrative setup or a complicated secondary gameplay loop that you need to explain, because most of the players will never ever see it. They're only there for 10 minutes, so really focus just on the core gameplay, and anything else you have to scope out. And also super, super important, forget about day 30 retention. It's really only about day 0. So very different from mobile, where it's always about getting players to come back, and you have timers, and you want to entice them with dailies and all this. It doesn't really work on web, if I'm being honest. It's really about new players, more so than returning players. Like an arcade, players are gonna come back for their favorite, and maybe when they come to the arcade, they always play the first machine they always like first, and then they will try some new ones. So most of your players are gonna be new players, and it's more important to focus on them than on your returning players if you want to have success on web. Also, with that in mind, what I would really suggest to do is use playtesting tools to make sure that this works for them. So start playtesting from day 1. Don't wait until your build is already done or until you already invested a lot of time in it. Just test the prototype and see if that core mechanic clicks, because the core mechanic and the onboarding is the most important. And get qualitative insights on that. So look at gameplay videos and see if players engage with it in the right way and if they are not confused. And then also start measuring quantitative metrics as soon as you can. So look at the average gameplay time, which is the most important metric you want to look at to make a successful game on web, because you want that average gameplay time to be 10 minutes or more. As we saw, it's on average 6 to 10 minutes that you get. So anything more than that means that you will have a very successful game on the web. And you can start testing that very early on, and then keep testing it very often, and iterate based on the behavior and not on assumptions that you have. An example of this, this is one of the Poké developers that worked on a game for 2 weeks. That's a pretty decent scope for a web game. And they tested every day at the end of the day if their iterations from that day made sense and if the players liked them. And as you can see, the average playtime slowly went up. But there has also been days where it went down. So for example, on February 27, they made a change to the game. Was an in-between screen between levels, and it immediately dropped the playtime with a minute, so it was quite significant. And then when they took that out again and made some more changes, they raised it up again to 7 minutes. So it's really the small changes that can make a big difference, and if you keep testing it, you will see that and spot that and know what made the change before you add a lot more things and you might not recognize anymore what the problem was. So a little bit of a plug here. If you want to do playtesting on web, Poke's playtesting tools are really, really cool. It gives you access to real web players, so you test with the right audience. You get a lot of gameplay videos that you can learn from day one. You can run the quantitative test that I just showed for average playtime metrics, and it's free. So that's also very nice. So even if you don't want to work with Poke, but you want to make a web game, you're still testing it with the right audience, and I can recommend using it. You can scan the QR code to sign up, and if you have more questions about it or want to learn more about it, please come to the Poke booth, and my team will please wave. Hi. we'll be happy to tell you more about it and show you what it looks like. Then some tricks, I would say almost, when you decide to go for web games. I think you're making the choice to choose sustainability over stardom. On the web, what you can earn, it's not as much as you can earn on Steam or that you can earn on mobile. It's going to be lower amounts of money, but it's going to be way more consistent and way more stable. So you're not betting all on it, 3 years of work on one horse and hope that you'll become a millionaire overnight and you'll have an indie hit. You're betting on slowly building up your portfolio over time, and with that, having a passive income that maybe after a year or after 2 years generates enough for you to go full-time. So to give you an idea of what that looks like, over half of the games on Poke recoup their development costs within a year. So that means that over half of the games on Poke earn money, and that is maybe, sounds like not super much, only half of them, but keep in mind that most games are developed in like 1 month to maybe 2 months. And so if only half of them and you release multiple games a year make money, then you're still gonna make money because the scope is so small and the initial investment is so low. And also compared to Steam or mobile, over half of the games making money is a very, 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 very large number compared to those other platforms. Developers on Poke earn an average of 40K a year. And developers that make a hit game on Poke can earn from 100K to up to $1 million a year just in developer earnings. So yes, there's definitely room to go full-time making web games or to earn enough to fund your own bigger project. Do keep in mind that most developers don't release just 1 game a year. They release, on average, 2.3. So 2 to 3 games are released. And with that, they build up to that 40K a year. So it's not going to be 40K from the moment you release your first game on web, but it can be 40K over the course of a year or 1.5 years. So go for multiple releases rather than making it really big. Again, scope is super important. I also checked, and last month, 65 out of 190 active developers on Poke, at least, made over 3K. So that ranged from 3K to 500K, but that means that there's quite a large number of developers on Poke that already proved that, yes, you can make a living on web and go full-time. 3K is kind of a number that we go for solo devs. We feel that 3K is, on average, a number where people feel confident enough to go full-time. So that's always the goal. If you're a team of 2, you might want to reach 6K before you make that choice. But, a lot of people are doing it, so it is definitely possible. On that note, again, scope small, then go smaller. Really be the opposite of ambitious if you want to have success on web. What is so much more important than content is gameplay. So really focus on making a really fun core gameplay thing and build a little experience around that, rather than taking a lot of different core mechanics and putting them together and make it a really big experience. It should be really snacks, more not meals. And like I already said before, scope for a great first session, you only need 20 to 30 minutes of content to complete the game before it releases. If people really like your game, you can always do an update later and add some more content for your fans. But in general, most players are very happy to play your game for 20 minutes and then finish it and move on to the next game. And also we see that a lot of people that really like a game, they don't mind at all to just play the game again from start. So anything that you do that is going to be over that 30 minutes, maybe 5% of your players is going to see it, and it's going to add a lot of investment time, and it's also going to add a lot of memory that you also want to avoid. So I would really recommend focusing on 20 to 30 minutes of content for a game, for a web game at most. On that note as well, you don't need 100 levels, like I already said. I already kind of mentioned it, but the fans of your game will come back and won't mind playing your game again. So it's totally fine to really focus on new players more so than fans. And what is also nice about a smaller scope is that you have faster feedbacks. You can build a game in 1 to 3 months, and then you can release maybe 2 or 3 projects a year, because not all the games that you're going to build in that time are going to be released, but if you make enough, some definitely will, if you stick with it and don't put a stick in the wheel. And so you'll learn from that every time, and eventually have a portfolio that allows you to have a passive income to maybe go full-time on web dev, or maybe you no longer need a publisher to invest in your indie game because you're getting enough passive income from your web games to fund it yourself. Also, a trick I think with smaller games in general, not just on the web, but it really does apply to the web as well, is that it's a great way to protect your mental health and your creative spark as a developer. There are a lot of constraints on web, like we talked about. There's a memory constraint, the player behavior is quite specific, but this also allows you to be very creative and innovative in the way that you design your game, and it allows you, or it forces you almost, to really focus on that core gameplay, and also learn to reuse assets, for example, and use tech in creative ways, which is really good lessons for future games as well. What is also nice is that you can make a project in 3 weeks instead of 3 years, and that also makes it a lot easier to kill your darlings. You can let go of something that maybe is not like what you hoped from it. Maybe it releases, but it doesn't do so much, but that's okay because you only invested 3 weeks in it, and you can just do it again. And if you do that after 3 years, it's quite hard to let go of something where you didn't find a publisher or an investor, and the game will never see the light of day. On that note, done is better than perfect, in my opinion. It feels really good to ship something small and see that players are enjoying it, and that you have players, rather than just staring at an unfinished dream for an infinite amount of time, where you are a game developer, but you cannot say that you've released any games. It's just a bit of a shitty feeling. Even with me, with my silly dress-up games, I can say that I have literally millions of players played my games, and that just feels pretty good. And what I also think is that web, specifically for smaller games, is perfect because it's really a playground. You have really fast cycles, so you can test a lot of weird ideas. There's a lot of playful energy. I always feel like basically it's doing game jams constantly. The web is the perfect platform to actually release those game jam projects as well. That was kind of like a really fast presentation. I tried to do it in 20 minutes. I almost made it. If you have, I think there's so much more to talk about, so please do let me know. Come by the booth. If you have questions, let me know. And also, here are some cool resources I gathered that you can take a look at that I think will give you a lot of context that I took inspiration from for this talk. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think you're getting everyone excited to make web games. Yes. I was also wondering, like, how is the algorithm working on the website? Because you want to be noticed, right, as a game developer?
Yeah, it depends where you release your game, of course. You can release it on your own platform, then you don't have an algorithm, or release it on others. I can only talk about Poki, because I only know how that algorithm works. Yeah. And that one is purely player-focused. So they're the only way to have super good performance in the platform is to make a game that players like. So it's based on how many players are playing. It's also a little bit based on how well you did the monetization, so ad monetization. And it's based on click rate as well. So yeah, it's the players decide in the end.
Okay, yeah, that's fair, that's fair. That's a very good system. Okay, do I have some other questions? Yes.
Hello, thank you so much for the talk, Romy. It was super, super interesting.
Thank you.
I'm very curious because you talked about, you don't worry about day 30 of retention, right? But I imagine these games, as you said, you make multiple games, you have them, I guess, generate kind of like a passive income over a number of different games. Is this something that developers are constantly updating their old catalogs, or is this something that just continues to be popular? If it's a good game, then in a year it might still be popular.
If it's really popular and it's like a big hit, I would definitely keep updating it, adding new content or cycling content, because sometimes there's memory restrictions, so then it's more about giving it a fresh look or a fresh theme for Christmas or a holiday or something like that. But there's also a lot of devs that finished a game and it's just a solid core little experience, and they might not be massive hits on web, but they have a consistent fan base and consistent player base, and so they just keep them on the back burner and only do SDK updates. And if you have a couple of those, that also works.
Yes. Yes, I know there's another question. Oops.
Yes, I also had a question, the topic of updating games. Are players actually informed when you make an update to your game? Or how are players supposed to know exactly that you updated the game?
So on Poki specifically, again, because I don't know how it works on other platforms, when you update the game, the recommender gets a little push, so the algorithm favors your game again for a little bit so that players see that there's an update, and it also gets an icon to show players that there's some new content, and we also usually change the thumbnail or ask you to change the thumbnail so players see what the new content is.
Okay, and I don't know who was first.
Thank you, Romy. Is the monetization strategies, are they a lot different from mobile? Because you have ads and interstitials.
Yeah,
I think
so
also the option to remove ads by purchasing some of them.
So again, it depends on the platform, and I only can talk about the Poki one. On Poki, it's only rewarded ads and interstitials, so there's no in-app purchases or subscription or anything like that. And rewarded ads are heavily favored over interstitials because that are ads that players want to watch because they get something in return. And so advertisers also prefer to have those ads because the engagement is higher with them. So the best practices really are focus on rewarded ads more so than interstitials. And things that really work well is an extra live, temporary boost, customization, things like that. It depends on your genre, I would say, what the best practice is, but those in general work well.
Yes, I noticed here a question.
Oh, sorry, one thing. Don't do too much, because players really don't like that. Poki also doesn't like it, so I would say don't lock any content behind an ad. It should never be forced to watch an ad. And also don't make it, like for a dress-up game, for example, I never go over 25% of items locked behind an ad.
Is that some of the data you also share? Be transparent with that after an ad update or integration that you see the drop off?
Yeah, you have a dashboard where you can see it. So if you do too much, you will see that back into your engagement time probably. But we also have QA, and they will warn you if they see it happening. Yeah, and also advise you to like take it down a notch. Or sometimes you have to say, actually, this is a great moment to do an interstitial. That will really help you. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. Does Poki also provide resources to check what games or type or genre is currently doing hot?
No, but it's an algorithm, so you can check it yourself. If you just go to the website, you can see the higher the tile is and the bigger the tile, the more popular at the moment. It does constantly change based on new games coming out and time of day and which section of the world is awake. So if you really want to know, I would just look at it a few times in the day and see which are consistent, and then you kind of know what's popular right now. Then again, it doesn't always work to really go for like something like it because it's already there. So you want to at least be unique enough that that is a new experience for players.
Yeah, we can secretly squeeze some more questions in because it's lunchtime.
But feel free to go to get some sandwiches if you don't have any questions, though.
So there was a slide that said that over half of games recoup the costs. I'm just curious, how do you calculate the costs and then you know, okay, that's how much this game costs? Is it self-reported?
Yeah, so I base it basically on the amount of time that's put into development and then the average wage of the country where it's developed in. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, good that answered that question. Yeah.
Yes, on the other side.
Oh, and also the size of the team, of course. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I had a question about moderating the games that are on Poki. Do you moderate the games to check if they still are working for the guidelines, if they have any guidelines?
Yeah.
Topics about maybe addiction or gambling, if you're very strict about those topics?
Yeah, we're pretty strict because we know that our audience tends to be younger as well. We always check every game before release. It's a curated platform, and we don't do anything that is gambling related. Even if it's not a gambling game, if there is things like, I don't know, a slot machine in there, that's probably something we won't allow. So yes, it's all curated. And also if there is chat, we have a Poki Guardian that moderates that. Or the developers make their own moderation tool. It's always something to discuss before release.
Yes. I think there was one last question, or are we out of? There is one question, and then I think we are all very hungry.
Love the vibes of your talk, and I learned things too. I was curious when you were talking about playtesting every day. Do you see differences in playtime between different times of the week and different hours?
Yes, so this is also a good reason to do it every day. We could do the playtest in a way where it's staggered over the day so that you get more general results, but then you would have to wait every time for a very long time until you get the results. So in the end, we decided to leave it up to the developer when they test it, and I would just kind of play with it when you do it. If you're making a cricket game, I would really make sure India is awake.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge with us. You are also on the expo with Pocky, right?
Yeah, we have a booth, so if you have more
Okay.
questions, you can find me there.
Exactly. So everyone, thank you for your attention and enjoy the lunch.
Thank you.